8. 458. .452, What Heavenly Music.
I'm sorry, what number?
452.
452, okay.
What heavenly music steals over the sea, entrancing chords like sweet melody. if you have your hymn book open, if you look at the left side in the top, it says it's written by James White. And if I remember right, he would come walking into a meeting, pounding his hymn book, singing this song. What heavenly music. Let's have prayer. Thank you, Father, for another Sabbath day. And what a glorious day it's been. The sun is wonderful. It's warm, and it's making everything come to life. I just came past some neighbors, and she's busy planting some flowers right now at this moment. So thank you for the weather that we've had. We are really very fortunate, and I hope we continue to say that all summer long, especially during fire season. Be with us now in our Vesper time. May we be blessed by what we hear. In Jesus' name, amen. It's nice to have somebody of our own. Come on up, Ralph. Come on up. Somebody of our own do a Vespers for us, especially when they offer to do it. That's the good part. So thank you, Ralph.
Well, this afternoon, I have a parable for you. I've been very hesitant to give you this parable because it was not written by Ellen White and it is not found in the Bible. And there are individuals who say that everything that comes from the pulpit has to or should be from Adventist theology. Now, the theology in the parable is correct. It just didn't, its source isn't that. Well, let me tell you how I came by this parable. Remember, quite a long time ago, there was a big discussion in Adventist circles about the age of the earth. And so to deal with that, Adventist universities gave geological and paleontological tours of the area. Now, 50 years ago, when I could climb mountains easily and so on, Andrews University was offering one of these, and I went. And we went to Wyoming and studied, well, just looked at things. Let me give you an example. There's a place in Wyoming, and it has a name, and I've forgotten the name, but I know what I saw. There are layers, and there happen to be 42 layers. And in each layer are tree stumps, upright. They're petrified tree stumps in 42 layers. So somebody working on a degree decided to count the number of rings in each layer, tree rings. And he came up with an average per layer of tree rings of 300 tree rings per layer. So you do the math. 300 times 40 layers is how big? How big a number? Pardon? 12,000. 12,000, and if a tree ring is formed every year, what does that represent? So this was a class in giving us the information. And so we said to the professor, well, how did this happen? Oh, he said, you're smart guys, you figure it out. So he would not tell us what his idea was. He just said, you figure it out. And he said there's really two possibilities. One is that the trees grew in place. And when the next layer came, it broke all the trees off, and the next layer grew. And how long would that take? The other one is that they floated into place. And I don't know which one is which. But anyways, so we drive along the road for a while and come to another place, and we see layers of water deposit material. And so you can see the layer, very definite layer. You can measure it. You know, it might be 100 feet thick or 200 feet thick. And there's several of these layers. And then we noticed that the layers have been, you know, water layers have to be laid flat, right? So then they were lifted up like this. And so they protracted if these layers would meet where they were eroded off, how big a mountain would it be? Oh, and he said it'd be 20,000 feet high. Wow. Oh, then you go a little farther and you come to another place, and there's a hillside, and you look at the hillside, and I actually have a piece of that hillside here, and they're very, very thin layers. And at the time when I got this piece, if you hit it with a rock hammer, you could smell bitumen, you know, tar. Now this rock has about 8 layers, and this particular layer has a fish fossil in it. So somewhere along the line, and then there are about 10,000 layers. So how in the world did it take? And many of the layers have fossils in them. So I'll let you run that around in his head, because if I asked the professor, he wouldn't tell me. He just said, you come up with your own idea. Well, so we would camp at a place, and the professors would give a worship. And the parable I'm going to read tonight was given by one of the professors, Dr. Peter Hare, who taught it was a science and not biology. It was kind of a physics science. And so he read this as a worship talk. And so I'm going to read it to you too. Oh, by the way, in the Bible, when Jesus gave a parable, each parable had one main thought. Now, what humans have done, they have taken aspects of that parable and tried to make something meaningful out of it. Like take the 10 virgins. You know, it had one main thought. What was the main thought that Jesus was trying to teach? Be on time, right? Or be ready. But people have taken, and you know, why the foolish virgin didn't have enough oil, and that meant something, and the others had too much oil, and that meant something, you know. But the main thought was be ready. And so this is one main thought also, and you may wish to extrapolate some other meanings out of some nuances in the story. And it's called The Country of the Blind. And it's set in South America. Oh, by the way, if any of you took a class in American literature, the author of this story is H.G. Wells. That meaning, if you haven't taken American literature, that doesn't mean anything to you. So 300 miles from Chimborazo, in the most remote of the Ecuadorian Andes, lies a mysterious mountain valley, cut off from the world of men, and it is known as the country of the blind. You see, long ago, it was possible via a very precipitous and arduous route to reach this valley, and a few families of Peruvian half-breed Incas fled there away from the tyranny of a Spanish conquistador. Now, the valley had everything a man could need. An even temperature, an easy-flowing stream, good grazing land, building material, and most of all, privacy from the outside world. Only one thing marred the peace of this valley, but it was enough to mar it greatly, and that was that the very first baby born in the valley was born blind. No one worried except that the next one also was born blind. And then the others, all babies after that, were born blind. And the older people gradually began to grow dim-sighted. So a village council was held, and it was decided that one of the strongest of the inhabitants would take a bar of silver and whatever else and journey into the outside world to perhaps buy a charm or a shrine or maybe even some potion to cure this plague of blindness. Well, after many days of hard walking, this man who was unaccustomed to the ways of the outside world came upon a remote monastery where he was invited to stay. And during his stay there, in this shelter of the gentle monks, a fault in the earth's crust at the very foundation of the Andes lurched and shook the Andes to their soul. The trail that this unfortunate misfit had followed was now covered by half a mountain. And the valley from whence he started was cut off from the exploring eyes of man. But he left a legend of a country of the blind somewhere in the mountains. Well, meanwhile, in the valley, the disease ran its course. The old became groping, the young saw dimly, and the babies saw nothing at all. But life was easy in this snow-rimmed basin, for there were no thorns, no evil insects, nor any beast save the gentle llamas that they had brought with them into the valley. And as the young grew blind, they made paths and lined them with log rails. They soon knew the whole valley perfectly. They even adapted to sightless control of fire and made stone ovens. Generation followed generation. And for 15 generations, and many things were forgotten and many things were devised. The wise men said, in our language, we have some words that we don't know what they mean. Words like sight, see, eyes, and blind. We don't know what those words are, so let's just eliminate them from our language. And so they were lost. Well, on the outside world, a party of Englishmen were making an attempt on Mount, and I don't know how to pronounce this, Parascotopetl, which is the Matterhorn of the Andes. The party had climbed here and there and were now making an attempt on the summit of the mountain itself. They had worked their way up to the foot of the last great precipice, and for a night they had built a little shelter in which to rest before the attempt the next day. Their leader, a man by the name of Nunez, was a Peruvian engineer who had made outside mountain climbing his hobby. Now, Nunez was a brilliant man, well-read, well-traveled. And in this night, he had stepped outside and had not returned. And so in the morning, the rest of the party, they saw the traces of his fall through the snow. He had slipped eastward toward an unknown side of the mountain. They saw his track to the steep slope of snow which led to the edge of a frightful precipice. Unnerved by the disasters, the mountaineers abandoned their attempt and went home. Now the man who fell, he survived. On a steep slope of snow, an avalanche had swept him over the edge, and he fell several hundred feet and landed on a slope so steep that not a bone was broken. He was flung at last into a gentler slope. He came to himself with the fancy of lying on a feather bed and the darting stars in his brain, and he finally became orderly. And first thing off, he explored himself and discovered he could stand without pain. Oh, he was bruised, there was no question about that. And with the mountaineer's thinking, he moved down the slope which entered a gorge, and that is a very standard rule. If you're lost on high country, go downhill, you'll find civilization. And after a day's walk, his path leveled out into a meadow that oddly appeared to be cultivated. He saw llamas and shelters for a time, a stream flowing through the meadow, which was enclosed by a chest-high wall of stone. He saw a number of curved paths paved with black and white stones, and as he moved further, he saw houses arranged in a very orderly fashion in 2 rows beside a center street, very much unlike the hodgepodge arrangement of other mountain villages. But no windows broke the wild brown, gray plastering on the walls. And into the mind of Nunez came the thought, "Why, the good fellow who did this, he's got to be blind as a bat." And he saw piles of straw with men and women sleeping on them. Nearby there were 3 men walking single file carrying pails or on yokes and yawning and stretching as if they had been up all night, although it was only mid-afternoon. Nunez stood on a conspicuous rock and shouted mightily. The 3 men stopped and moved their heads as though they were searching for him with their ears. He waved his arms, got no response. "Those fools must be blind," said Nunez. And then he remembered the legends of the country of the blind, and through his mind ran the verse like a refrain that in the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And as 3 men got close, they listened for him. And Nunez could see that their eyelids were closed and they saw no bulges beneath them. And they suddenly grabbed him and felt him all over. "Where do you come from?" they asked in a form of Spanish that he had never heard before, but he could understand them barely. Nunez thought, "Well, I'm from Bogota." By the way, it's the capital. A city that at night is a very beautiful sight. "Sight?" said Pedro, one of the 3. They felt him all over again. "Oh, careful," Nunez shouted as they poked a finger into his eye. They thought this organ most queer with its fluttering lid. Pedro said, "Let me lead you by the hand." "I don't need to be led. I can see," said Nunez. "See?" questioned Pedro. "Yes, see," answered Nunez, who turned quickly toward the second man and fell over the pail. "We better hold him and lead him," said Pedro. "He is newly formed from the rocks, and he speaks strange words, and his senses are not yet perfect." Well, so Nunez submitted to being led by the hand and thought, "In time, I'll teach these people the advantage of sight and show them to a better life." He was led to a house and thrust suddenly into the interior, and inside it was black as coal, and he felt a fist. He fell flat over a man's legs, and one hand struck the man's face as he fell, and a dozen hands held him down. After this fall, he was led up and questioned, and he told them about Bogota, the mountains, the sea, many other things of the outside world. They told him that he was newly formed from the rocks, and his senses were not developed as yet. Wise men told how the time was divided into 2 parts. Warm day, which was for sleep, and cool night, which was for time for work. They told him that there were 3 levels of existence. The lowest had no sense of touch like the llamas. Second were men, and third were angels, whose fluttering they heard but could not feel. Nunez thought a long time before he finally figured out they were talking about the birds. They told him that touch was the greatest sense, and hearing second, smelling and tasting third. No other sense existed, and hence they had no words or concepts like see, sight, eyes, or blind. And it was now time to sleep, and the villagers asked Nunez if he knew how to eat or sleep, since he was so newly made. He said he did, and went apart to sleep for the rest of the day. He thought how he would have to show these people what sight really was, and that he would be their king. Now when evening arrived, a man came for him and called him Bogota. They called him Bogota because he said that word so often. Nunez smiled and took 2 steps off the path. "Don't trample the grass," said the man. Nunez stepped back on the path and said, "Here I am." And the man said, "Why did you not come when I called? Can't you hear the path as you walk? But you will learn." Nunez said, "Has no one told you that in the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king?" "Well, what is blind?" asked the blind man. Nunez now tried in many ways to show the advantage of sight. Once he saw Pedro coming down path 17, too far away for sound or smell, and Nunez predicted that Pedro would be there shortly. But Pedro instantly moved to another path and did not arrive as predicted. And another time he attempted to tell at a distance the activities of the valley, but everything of importance seemed to occur either in the houses or behind them. After this failure, the people scoffed and laughed at him. Nunez resolved that if he could not take his coup d'etat by persuasion, he would use force. So one day, he grabbed a spade as a weapon, and then he made a new discovery about himself. He called out, "In this valley, I'll do as I like. Do not touch me or I'll hit you." But they joined a loose circle around him and advanced toward him with their heads cocked. It was like playing blind man's bluff with everyone blind but you. He dashed toward an open space, but it closed. He swung the spade at a man who went down with a yellow pane. Nunez ran with the men following at a half-speed lope. Nunez saw there was no escape, so he ran for the slopes where the llamas ventured. The people didn't go there. He stayed there for 2 days without food or shelter. He said, "This is no good." Finally, he called and said that he was made and very newly joined, but he was wiser now and repented of all he had done. They asked him if he could see, and he said no, that the word meant nothing to him. They asked him what lay overhead, and he replied that a rock ceiling covered the valley, as was their teaching. Oh, they whipped him and then nursed him for several days until he was better. And so Nunez became a resident of the country of the blind. He was assigned as a slave to a man called Jacob. He was a kind man, had a land holding, which Nunez had to work at night. Imagine weeding the garden at night. If he became king, that was one of the first things he would change. Now, Nunez had a younger daughter whose name was Medina. Her eyes were less sunken and red than the other girls, but her voice was too strong, which did not satisfy the acute hearing of the valley swains. So she had no lover. Nunez watched her, and she noticed him. He began to talk with her with a lover's voice, and she spoke with a tender reverence that came near to awe. She had never before been touched in adoration, and Nunez could see that she was pleased. After a time, Nunez wanted to ask Jacob for the hand of Medina, but she hesitated and was fearful. Nunez thought, if I could have Medina, I could tolerate living out my life in this valley. One of the older sisters told Jacob of the love between Nunez and Medina, and immediately it was great opposition to this union because they liked Medina, but they thought Nunez as a total idiot. Especially the young men and the sisters opposed the match and were angry at the idea of corrupting the race. One man went so far as to strike Nunez. Well, Nunez struck back, and the man with the eyes had an obvious advantage. Still, the marriage was declared impossible. But Jacob liked this clumsy, obedient serf. He also had a tenderness for his daughter and explained to her that Nunez was an idiot and could not do anything right. Medina said that in time, he would learn. He is better than he was, and he is getting better, and he loves me, and I love him. That's powerful, by the way. There seemed no other choice, and so Jacob took the matter to the council chamber. The discussion took a long time. Some said this, some said that, and after a time, a doctor among them said that he had made a study and thought that Nunez might be cured. You see, he said, his brain is affected, and it is being irritated by the constant movement of the soft place on the front of his face that he calls eyes. I think, said the doctor, that a very relatively simple surgical operation, namely the removal of those soft bodies, he could be cured. And then he'll be sane, said Jacob. He'll be perfectly sane and a quite admirable citizen, said the wise doctor. Oh, thank goodness for science, said old Jacob, and he went forth at once to find Nunez. But the manner in which Nunez received the news seemed cold and disappointing. One might think you do not care for my daughter, said Jacob. At times when Nunez had spoken to Medina of things seeing, she looked interested and pleased, but yet strangely like one does when one listens to a poet speak of utopia. Yet it was Medina who finally persuaded Nunez to face the blind surgeons. She listened with deep sympathy as he spoke of flowers, the sky, stars, and the mountains. Would he be willing to give up this ability? If I were to consent to this, he said at last, and she flung her arms around him, weeping widely. Oh, if you only would, she sobbed, if you only would. For a week before the operation that would transform him from a seeing slave to a blind citizen, Nunez knew nothing of sleep. He wandered around trying to bring his mind to bear on this dilemma. He had given his consent, and still he wasn't sure. The last work time was now over, and the sun rose in splendor over the golden crest. On his last day of vision, he had a few minutes with Medina before she went apart to sleep. Tomorrow, he said, I shall see no more. Dear heart, she answered, and pressed his hands with all her strength. They will hurt you but a little, and you're going through this for me. And if ever a woman's heart and life can repay, I will repay. He was drenched in pity for himself and for her. He held her in his arms and looked into her face for the last time. Nunez whispered at that dear sight, goodbye. And in silence, he turned away from a sobbing Medina. He intended to go to a quiet place where the mountains were beautiful with white narcissus and remain there until his hour of sacrifice should come. And as he walked, he lifted his eyes and saw the morning angel, the morning like an angel in golden armor marching down the steeps. It seemed to him that compared to this glorious splendor, he, this blind world in the valley, his love and all were no more than a dark pit of sin. He did not turn aside, but went on walking toward the mountains. He saw their infinite beauty, and his imagination soared over them to the things beyond, things that he was now to resign forever. He thought of the trees, the birds, the limitless sea, the mountains, sunsets, rivers, rows of white houses, the immeasurable sky. And his eyes scrutinized the great curtain of mountains with a keenness unlike something he had ever done before. He thought, you know, if I ever could go up that slope and then to that chimney over above that, and above that ledge, it might lead to another chimney and into another, and to a talus slope and over to that slope. He turned to the curtain of mountains, and with the skill of a mountaineer, he circumspectly began to climb. By sunset, he had climbed very high. His clothes were torn, his body was bruised. He had a smile on his face, and from where he stood, the valley of the blind, now covered by haze and shadow, seemed very remote, small, evil, and insignificant when placed alongside the beauty inspired only by the Infinite One. He thought of the place in which he had so recently had come and to which he'd never return. Have you ever heard in the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king? I have. Yeah. And so this was a worship service talk given at a evening Vespers. We had one every evening. And if you think, and you will think, I know, because it's very meaningful and has impressed me for a long time. Anyways, thank you.
And if we were to ask you what your opinion was, you would say, I want you to think about it. We have time for a couple more songs. Marilyn, could we have 2 more songs? 444. I'm a Pilgrim. Number 444. I'm a pilgrim and I'm a stranger. I can tarry but a night. Do not detain me, for I am going to where the fountains are ever flowing. I'm a pilgrim and I'm a stranger. I can tarry but a night. There the glory is ever shining. Oh, my longing heart is there. In this country so dark and dreary, I long have wandered, forlorn and weary. I'm a pilgrim and I'm a stranger. I can tarry but a night. There the city to which I journey, my Redeemer is its light. There is no sorrow, nor any sighing, nor any tears there, nor any dying. I'm a pilgrim and I'm a stranger. I can tarry but a night. I think in a way it goes along with the parable. We're pilgrims. We cannot be detained, and so on. I was thinking of the words as we were singing it. And now let's sing the next song right next to it, 445, I'm but a stranger here. 445. I'm but a stranger here, heaven is my home. Earth is a desert drear, heaven is my home. Danger and sorrow stand Pardon me?
Give a little more science if you want.
Pardon me?
I can give a little more science if you want.
Okay.
A little more science. If you drive from here to Penticton, beside the road there are the clay banks, and they've got layers in them. Did you ever notice that? And if you go across the lake, there are those clay banks, and they have layers in them. And somebody figured out that those layers at one time met. Now, how do you lay down a layer of clay? Well, you've got to have water, and it's got to have a lot of gunk in it, mud or something, and then it dries out, and the clay stays. And then to make another layer, you've got to do the same thing over again, and over again, and over again, and over again. So be aware that when you drive to Penticton, the top of the clay banks was the lake level at one time. So what kept the water from flowing away? Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Let me give you another example. On the way to Walla Walla, there's a place called Dry Falls. And if you stop there, the government has set up a place to look around and explain things and so on. The layers you see are volcanic. We know that. And I've counted 5 layers. Now, how far they go down, I don't know. And in one of the layers, if you climb up kind of a bank, and there's a hole in the wall, and you look inside, and it has all the feet, all the legs and horns of a rhinoceros. So there was a rhinoceros there one time. Now there's nothing left of the rhinoceros but the cast. So when the stuff came over him, he died. Now he's rotted and gone away, but when it hardened, it's a cast. Now, what caused Dry Falls? Well, I'll give you the explanation, and you can go with it where you want. During the Ice Age, and when the Ice Age started to melt, a lake was formed above Dry Falls. And so what was keeping the water in and was an ice dam. And the lake was called Lake Missoula. And it ranged northern part of Washington through the top part of Idaho and into Montana. It was a huge lake. And they can see where the lake level was, made some effect on the mountain. And so they know how deep it was. So how much water was in it? Well, they said, figuring out the depth and the size and everything, it had 50 cubic miles of water. So how much is that? Well, by comparison, Lake Okanagan has 6 cubic miles of water. And at some time, the ice dam broke and water went over that falls. Now, the falls wasn't there at the beginning. It was way down in the Columbia River Gorge. And as the water came over, it kept gnawing away on the rock material, and it came all the way back to where Dry Falls, when the water ran out, that's the place where the falls is now. There's a little bit of water going over, but essentially none. And they've suspected a bunch of different things, like how much water went over at one time, but it made a ditch probably 150 miles as the rock was eroded away. And the Columbia River Gorge and all the delta beyond it came from that material. And if you don't like that explanation, then come up with your own. That's what the professor said. Ken.
Ralph, with your have ever comprehended the violence and the eruption of the earth when the flood came and subsequently then subsided. And where did all that water go? And did that not have an effect on what you're talking about, dealing with the issue of layers? Did that ever come up in the discussion?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it came up. And the professor said, well, build a story that fits with what you think. The professor didn't, they were very careful not to be specific on what happened there in any of these cases. They said, this is what we know. What you do with that information, that's up to you. Janice.
Sage Mesa, which is a little bit outside Penticton, can you make that comparable to Kamloops? And it seems to me that they are higher than Sage Mesa in Penticton, and the Fraser and the Thompson, they run down, I think, into the Columbia. Do they not?
No,
No?
they exit in Vancouver.
They do?
Yes, and the Columbia exits at Astoria in Oregon. Look on the map. That one you can look up easy.
So the terrain in Sage Mesa and Kamloops is the same, isn't
I
it?
don't know this Mesa thing you're talking about.
Well, in Sage Mesa, that's what it's called when you're driving along the lake
So
coming out of
what about
Penticton.
it?
Pardon me?
What about it?
The terrain is the same,
Okay.
the substance of them.
Oh, now to say what the material here, whether it was done by the flood or by the draining of the ice age, that's really difficult to determine. That's really difficult. Yeah. Go ahead.
I've read that they learned so much since Mount St. Helens blew up. All the trees that were laid flat, and they floated around on the new lake. No tops on, perfect logs, root balls. And after a time, the log gets waterlogged at the root end. And they found these logs, deadheads, straight up and down in the water, and slowly they settle down into the mud.
Absolutely.
And what one layer does not necessarily mean centuries or anything. They found that, let's say in the springtime when the snows were melting and sending water down into that lake, a sunny afternoon could bring down an inch of mud. And the next day could bring down another inch of mud, and 2 weeks later. And so you could have,
in between.
no, it didn't have to dry. It was just
Okay.
dirty water coming into that lake. The particulates would settle down and create a layer. And depending how the rain was, so they found that to attribute 40 layers to centuries or millennia or whatever could be explained in just within one season at that altitude on that mountain, in that one place.
Okay, notice
I'm grateful that we have an eternity to study some of these things because we don't know the answers right now. You heard Adrienne this morning say that next Sabbath is Children's Day, and that will include a Vespers for the children and us. And the following week is Youth Day. Same kind of a thing. The youth will be putting on the Vespers that evening. So let's support them. They need our help. Father in heaven, we thank you again that you have given us lots of information, lots of questions that we have, but the promise that we'll have a chance to get all the answers when we get to heaven. We look forward to that day. Please come soon so that we can be together with all those that we love, and that especially with you. Be with us this week. We need you